Hi everyone. Today we are talking about an article that is making the rounds right now on social media and through some conservative news sites. And I think it's something that's really important for us to talk about. It is something that was published by the American College of Pediatrics, and it is called Gender Identity Harms Children, right here. Gender Identity Harms Children. Now, what is happening with this is that a lot of conservative commentators, people who are opposed to the LGBT community, are using this to say, see, I told you so. All these pediatricians are saying that it's actual child abuse for you to support your transgender child. And what we need to talk about is who this group actually is, and make sure that the confusion about them gets cleared up, because there is confusion and they actually cause this confusion on purpose. They want people to think that they are a group that is bigger and has more weight than they really do. So first, let's look at who they are. On their About Us page, they say they are a national organization of pediatricians and other healthcare professionals dedicated to the health and well-being of children. They were formed in 2002, so not that long ago. So what they say their mission is to promote a society where all children from the moment of conception are valued unselfishly. We expect societal forces to support the two-parent father-mother family unit and provide for children role models of ethical character and responsible behavior. Now, did you notice that? The two-parent father-mother family unit, they were formed in 2002 when the American Academy of Pediatrics, the actual big organization that has more than 64,000 members in it, came out in support of same-sex couples being allowed to adopt children. That's why this group was created. That was the only reason that this group was created. The core values of the college include recognizing that there are absolutes and scientific truths that transcend relative social considerations of the day. And they recognize that good medical science cannot exist in a moral vacuum, and they pledge to promote such science. Well, right there, that pretty much tells me everything I need to know about them. They are putting their version of morality ahead of actual science because the things that they promote are not what science actually tells us. Now let's get to their statement here that gender ideology harms children. The first thing that they say here is human sexuality is an objective biological binary trait. X, Y, and XX are genetic markers of health, not genetic markers of a disorder. Well, actually, yeah, they're genetic markers, but they're not going to indicate necessarily whether you're healthy or unhealthy, because there are so many variations. XXY, XYY, XXXY, X, and nothing. I mean, there are so many variations of this where people live perfectly normal, healthy lives, that this is not actually a marker of health. And because there are many, many more variations than simple XX and XY, that is not the determination of who you are as a human being. Number two, no one is born with a gender. Everyone is born with a biological sex. Gender, an awareness of sense of self of male and female, is a sociological and psychological concept, not an objective biological one. Well, they are actually finding more science that supports that gender identity is formed in the womb thanks to the hormones that the developing baby receives. So, yes, there is no one thing right now that anyone can pinpoint to in the brain that says you are going to be male, you are going to be female, you're going to identify as the opposite gender of your physical anatomy or anything like that. But at the same time, it's definitely not just sociological and it's not just psychological. What they want to forget here is that gender identity, the innate sense of who you are inside, is different, separate, than gender expression and gender roles. Those things are definitely sociological because we have communities all throughout the planet who have different ideas of what gender roles should be and what gender expression is okay. And even here in the US, people break down those things all the time and they don't necessarily have to match your identity. So they're failing to separate those things out and they're just wanting to live by stereotypes. Then I have a person's belief that he or she is something that they are not is at best a sign of confused thinking. And they whip out gender identity disorder and the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of the American Psychiatric Association to provide their proof. They say gender dysphoria is a recognized mental disorder in the DSMV. Well, yes, it is in that book, but what it also says in there is that the actual identity is not the disorder. The disorder comes from having to deal with all of the external pressures and judgment coming from society. Those are the things that cause stress to people, not necessarily what they believe about themselves. Moving on, number 4, puberty is not a disease and puberty blocking hormones can be dangerous. Well, no one has ever said that puberty is a disease. All we're saying is that trans people should not have to go through a puberty that does not match their gender identity, because that can be devastating to them. Puberty blockers are not necessarily dangerous. They have been used for 30, 40 years over in Europe. They've been used forever for precocious puberty. No one is saying you go on puberty blockers indefinitely and that we don't ever want to have a puberty. We're not saying that. We're just saying puberty blockers help people not develop the wrong secondary sex characteristics. And then after that, they can go on to cross-sex hormones. And yes, they do cover those. Children who use puberty blockers to impersonate the opposite sex, again, not sex, we're talking gender, and we're not talking impersonation, we're talking about recognizing who they actually are. They will require cross-sex hormones in late adolescence. Cross-sex hormones are associated with dangerous health risks, including but not limited to high blood pressure, blood clots, stroke, and cancer. Okay, so we should never give anyone cross-sex hormones because they might have a stroke, they might have high blood pressure. I'm sorry, but what percentage of the population has all of those things as health risks anyway? I'm thinking that the suicide rate among trans people who aren't allowed to transition is a little bit scarier than the idea that 30 years down the road, someone might have cancer. And pretty much every trans adult that I've spoken to has said, I will take that risk. I will watch my health. I will do what I have to do to try to prevent myself from having a stroke, and I will monitor my blood pressure and everything if that means that I can live in a body that aligns with who I am. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So you're trying to, these people want to impose their concept of what is healthy on other people when I'm guaranteeing you someone in their family has had cancer or has had high blood pressure and it had nothing to do with taking cross-sex hormones. So that really kind of makes no sense. They also say, according to the DSVM, as many as 98% of gender-confused boys and 88% of gender-confused girls eventually accept their biological sex after naturally passing through puberty. I have never seen that statistic anywhere in there. Now, maybe what they're trying to say is people who exhibit cross-sex behaviors, again, and that's gender expression or gender roles, the boy who plays with the doll. But that's not someone who has gender dysphoria. There are distinct differences. So yeah, maybe 98% of kids who played with dolls as a kid grow up to be men, and that's fine. But there's the 2%, the trans people, the people who actually need to be treated, who are different. And that's okay. Then we have another one where they ignore the actual truth. Rates of suicide are 20 times greater among adults who use cross-sex hormones and undergo sex reassignment surgery, even in Sweden, which is among the most LGBTQ affirming countries. Well, again, they're taking a tiny bit of information and ignoring the rest of it. And what did they say in their own position statement? That they want to be scientific based, but at the same time use their morality to follow science. So this is where that comes into play. Rates of suicide are 20 times higher among adults who use cross-sex hormones and undergo sexual reassignment surgery. Well, that was compared to the actual non-trans population. And we all know that the trans population has higher rates of suicide. And these numbers also come from like the 80s, early 90s. It's been a few years. What are we in? 2016? Yeah, it's been a few years since all of that happened. Society has evolved, society has moved along, and now the rates of acceptance post-transition are much better for trans people, which means that, again, the problems of gender dysphoria are not the internal issues as much as the external ones. Adults who transition, teens who move into adulthood, transitioning, have a much less likely rate of unhappiness afterwards. And actually, most report being very happy and having an improved life and a better sense of self and relief when they are allowed to transition, because society is becoming more accepting and more tolerant of them. So what they've done is take one piece of data from the study and try to separate it from all the conditions that you have to take into account. The time frame that it was done, the actual years of the study, comparing trans population to non-trans population, rather than the population of people who are allowed to transition and can't, the people who have surgery and the people who can't afford surgery. So they're trying to manipulate the data here to suit their purposes. Not really sure how moral that is, but that's what they're doing. And then finally, conditioning children into believing a lifetime of chemical and surgical impersonation of the opposite sex is normal and healthful is child abuse. I think the conditioning that we had with our child, for example, was when we were trying to say, no, you can be a boy who likes those things and that's okay. And she said, you're not getting it. That's not it. That's not enough. Because I'm not a boy who likes those things. I'm a girl who likes those things. Why do you not see that? We didn't have to condition her to believe that she was a girl. She was a girl. She told us she was a girl. We actually tried a version of conversion therapy and conditioning her to being a boy and accepting that. And it made her more and more depressed, more and more sullen, more and more hopeless. Transitioning is what made the difference in her. And that is what makes a difference in all of these people that we're talking about. Chemical and surgical impersonation, a lot of people take hormones. A lot of people take a lot of things for endocrine issues, and we're certainly not saying that that is a problem for them. We actually develop a lot of times one drug to counteract another drug's side effects. And if having side effects is okay for the general population, why is having side effects and then minimizing the risk that goes along with those any worse or different for trans people? I don't understand that. Surgical impersonation of the opposite sex, they seem to believe that any surgery is surgical mutilation. That's actually what they say here. Unnecessary surgical mutilation of their healthy body parts. What is plastic surgery? What is it? From breast enhancements to butt implants to nose jobs to facelifts to everything else. Are you not trying to impersonate a person that you aren't? Are you trying to identify a different way? Are you trying to improve something? My nose is perfectly fine. It works. I don't like it. I wish it looked different, but it's my nose. My chin, not so much of a chin. Yeah, side profile. I hate to show that to you because I don't like it. I wish I had a little bit more of a strong, prominent chin. There's nothing wrong with it. But if I went to get a chin implant, no one would call it surgical mutilation of a perfectly healthy body part. I don't understand why people are trying to imply or trying to impose their concept of what is healthy onto another human being. Because if a trans person's body is causing them so much distress that they want and need surgery to feel better about themselves and to be able to navigate through life every single day as a healthy, productive citizen, rather than constantly hearing the noise in their minds about body, 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 this isn't right, this isn't me, isn't it beneficial to them to allow them to have the surgery, to offer surgeries to them that can make them function in society in a healthier way? I mean, the brain is part of our biology, and yet so many people want to say everything about you is determined by your genitals. There's a lot more that I want people to notice about up here than I want them to notice about down there. I mean, I wear clothes for a reason. It's because I'm not wanting to walk out and have everyone go, oh, what genitals do you have, Debbie? Let's talk about that. No, I want people to say, hey, Debbie, what do you think about the election? What do you think about this parenting? What do you think about this TV show? What do you think about The Bachelor? I don't watch it, by the way. But again, we're not out in society talking about our genitals every day. We're talking about what we think, what we feel, what we believe. All of that is happening up here. Why do we put so much pressure on trans people to say that your body makes you who they are? It doesn't. It doesn't. So again, coming back to the truth of this article, in their 8 points of gender ideology harms children statement here, no references. No references at all. They mention the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. They don't say where the quotes that they supposedly have, the numbers, come from in there. There are no references to anything else that you can go and check up for yourself. So that is always something that you should look out for when you're reading things online and statements like this. However, we have from the group that you should pay attention to, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the organization that almost every pediatrician in the country belongs to, with 64,000 at least members, probably a little bit more since that information was put out. They have statements: office-based care for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning youth. In this, they talk about homophobia and heterosexism and how that impacts identity formation. They talk about health disparities for transgender youth. They talk about promoting sexual health in LGBTQ youth. They have guidelines for the treatment of transgender youth, and it says supportive counseling is paramount to assisting the teenager with any dysphoria and to explore gender roles before altering the body. Yep, that's what they do. The therapy consists of potentially delaying puberty, then using hormonal therapy, and finally, surgery. It's critically important, the role of a pediatrician, to assist parents of sexual minority youth. They should acknowledge the parents' feelings, but provide information and support for the adolescent. Not going to put up with the unsupportive mom and dad. They're going to help the unsupportive mom and dad understand how and why supporting their LGBTQ youth is important, critical, key. Pediatricians should be available to answer questions to correct misinformation. Oh, like that put out by the American College of Pediatricians? Why, yes, that's what they should do. Transgender adolescents need to be supported and affirmed. They need education and referral for the process of transition and about avoiding the pitfalls of using treatments that were not prescribed by a licensed physician, meaning they don't want you to feel so desperate that you go out on the street or you get things from the underground market. They want to be involved in your care because they are dedicated to keeping you healthy. They are not dedicated to telling you that you are crazy, that you are immoral, and that you are wrong. Conversion therapy, not part of their practices. And then at the end of this, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of references where you can go yourself and you can see the how and the why and the what for, because they are not afraid of the truth. They're not afraid of true science. They're not afraid of separating what they might have thought of as a moral thing from what is actually moral, which is supporting people so that they don't feel driven to suicide. There you go. That's the truth. Do not confuse these two organizations. One is a manipulative and deceptive group of a couple hundred people at most who has an agenda. The other is a group of almost every doctor who's going to work with kids in the country who is dedicated to health and the well-being of their patients through science.